It's now time for your Election Crimes Bulletin with Greg Palast.
And this is the Election Crimes Bulletin on Flashpoints with Greg Palast. I'm Dennis Bernstein. There are things jumping everywhere, Greg. You are honed in like laser beam in Atlanta. And that lady there ain't messing around. That is for damn sure. The district attorney there ain't taking no junk from no one. And we're going to see some interesting things unfolding from, let's just start with the new developments. Trump's attempt to overturn the election. Let's talk about why. What does Brian Kemp's name have to do with this? Why is he suddenly in the middle?
Well, very big news, and he's put himself in the middle. Again, Fani Willis is the district attorney of Fulton County, which is the big hunk of Atlanta. And she is investigating whether Trump illegally tried to overturn the election in Georgia. And she hasn't named him yet, or even subpoenaed him, named him as a target. But she has named Lindsey Graham and others, including, Rudy Giuliani. Now, Rudy Giuliani was forced to testify yesterday before her grand jury. Now, understand that the complaint against her by Trump and Kemp and everyone else is that this is political, these subpoenas, this whole investigation. Well, except that, and they keep saying, Atlanta Democrat. That's code word for black. She's a black woman. But all of her actions have been approved and ordered by Republican justices. Who said, you bring in, now she's subpoenaed Brian Kemp. Now, this is interesting. Brian Kemp is the governor of Georgia. He's running for re-election against Stacey Abrams. He's also the star of my film, Vigilante, Georgia's vote suppression hitman. And so why is Kemp involved in this? Because here's the interesting thing. Kemp was the guy who did say he thought the election was probably correct. Understand that Trump had called him several times, as well as the Secretary of State, to say overturn the election. That is, don't call a special session of the legislature and don't certify the results of the electoral. In other words, don't send anyone to the Electoral College for Georgia. Kemp said that's against the Georgia Constitution. I have no authority to call a special session. I have no authority to overturn and decertify this election. You have to understand, it's not like Kemp doesn't love Trump. Trump endorsed him. They were hand in hand, cheek to cheek, when Kemp was running for governor against Stacey Abrams. They were very close. Kemp was a massive supporter of Trump's reelection in Georgia. But apparently he wasn't willing to go to prison for Agent Orange. Now, the question is, what's going on here with the subpoena, if you want to hear about that.
Well, let's talk about the subpoena, but just say a little bit more about who Fani Willis is and that little encounter. I mean, she really demonstrated when she dismissed Kemp's attorney. Kemp's attorney was saying this is a political investigation. He's not going to show up. She says, not only are you not going to you're going to show up, but I was going to give you a little extra privilege and let you come into the grand jury room. But now you're going to sit outside, man. In other words, this woman, and she is an expert in doing the RICO statute. So she is coming in through that organized crime door. Tough woman.
She's very tough. In fact, a lot of African-American officials think that she's way too tough. She goes for the handcuffs right away. But no one doubts that she knows exactly what she's doing as a prosecutor. So understand, when you're called before a grand jury, you don't get the right to a lawyer. If you're the target, like Giuliani was, you can keep taking the Fifth Amendment. And I imagine that he did nothing but take the Fifth Amendment, because Rudy blabs too much. He would have told us all the wonderful things he said. I think his
attitude changed a little bit on the way in there, because he knows who he's going before.
Well, remember, he was a federal prosecutor. He knows he's facing hard time breaking rocks on a chain gang in Georgia, and he saw those, he saw HUD and those other films with Paul Newman. So, he does. I don't think he's looking forward to that. So I'm sure he took the Fifth. But again, I have to speculate because it is a secret grand jury proceedings. In addition, you don't get a lawyer. But Kemp was claiming executive privilege as governor, but that's kind of like monarchic privilege. I'm too important as governor of Georgia to answer questions about a crime in which I'm a witness. And as Fani Willis, the prosecutor, said to the court and said to his lawyer, he is merely a witness. What is the problem here? Well, of course, it raises real questions, because she not only was going to let his lawyer hold his hand, she was going to allow him to actually just do a remote, go on the kind of a closed Skype system the court has, give the grand jury 20 minutes, say what happened on the phone calls with Trump, and, on your way, sir. In fact, they never made it public. It was Brian Kemp who made it public that he was being called in. Now, who the heck is going to announce that they've been called before a grand jury? But he did. He made it public and then said, oh, she's doing this politically to harm me. Well, wait, she kept it completely silent. The other thing is she was going to let him have a lawyer, just come in by remote. No. He kept dragging his feet until now he's in the middle of his campaign for re-election. He says, she is forcing me to take time out of my campaign when it's at its crescendo. That's the word that they use, the crescendo of his campaign. Well, this is brand new. I've heard of diplomatic immunity. I've heard of executive privilege. I've never heard of I'm on a campaign privilege to be a witness in a criminal case. I don't think you and I could do that, Dennis. Oh, what kind of business? We've got the election crimes bulletin tonight. Sorry, we can't show up in court. Yeah, I think that the judge is. I think the judge will have to hide his laughter. He's going to have to turn around from in laughing Kemp out of court. But the question is why? Why in the world, when a guy had basically a free ride, you can have your lawyer, you can call it in. What's the problem? And I think the problem is he knows that if he has to talk, and he also wanted to control what he wanted to know all the questions in advance and control the scope of it. They said, you can't do that. What are you talking about? That cannot be done. You're an officer of the court, she told this lawyer, and you keep saying this is political. He's going to end up with sanctions. Believe me. You don't play games like this and with a grand jury. And what I think is going on here is I want to know as a journalist who's been hunting down Brian Kemp for now 9 years since he was the renegade Secretary of State of Georgia, really America's vote suppressor in chief with his really close friend Chris Kobach of Kansas. What were on those calls with Trump? I suspect that while the big public story is that he said, I'm not going to overturn the election, he was probably spending a lot of time trying to figure out how he could actually, in fact, overturn the election. That's one. And the second thing is that, he signed a bill right after the election, a month after that, after the January 5 riot. He signed this bill, SB 202, which basically sets up to give him the power to do exactly what Trump wants. I was just talking to Helen Butler. She's considered Miss Vote in Georgia. She's head of Reverend Lowry's former organization, late Reverend Lowry's current organization for voting rights. She was also, because of her expertise in voting, on the Morgan County Board of Elections. And the first thing Kemp did after that law was passed was remove her. He's removed 10 members of local boards of election. I asked her what's going on here. For my film, I want to get on camera. Well, why did Kemp remove you immediately as soon as he had the power? She said, because Trump called and said you have to decertify the election. And the only way to do that in Georgia, Kemp can't do it. Kemp has to get local boards of election to refuse to certify their county's vote. So if he can pressure boards of election to decertify in 2024, he can hand Trump what he wants in 2024. And I think that there may have been some discussion about what they're going to do in the future to change the law. Because I could see Kemp saying, because I've followed him a long time, telling Trump, Mr. President, well, I can't do it now. It's not in the law, but I'm going to make it the law. And then when you run again in 2024, I'll make you president. I think if he's done that, then he's in real trouble, not only with his reelection.
So he's worried about going from witness to target. You said
right.
that Graham was a target. He's not a target. He's just a witness, right?
He's a witness, but I think that
he's a witness.
He's really on the unicycle going down that circus line to become named. And I'll tell you why. As we mentioned in the last Election Crimes Bulletin, The real crime here is putting together a slate of fake electors and mailing them to the National Archives to hand over to Congress, to hand over to the Vice President, Mr. Pence, and say, "Oh, these are the electors who were voted by the people of Georgia to represent us at the Electoral College." And these are people who never were on the ballot. They never ran for Electoral College. You can't just take names out of the phone book who will swear that they'll vote for you for president and declare that they've been made electors by the people of any state. That's mail fraud. It's a crime. It's racketeering, especially under Georgia law, because it's an easier case to make under Georgia law. Because under Georgia law, you don't have to have enterprise. This is a little technical about racketeering law. To bring a racketeering case, which I've done for the Justice Department, you have to show usually a years-long operation of an enterprise, like you're the mob. But in Georgia, you don't. You can have one instance. So this one project of trying to jam through fake electors, that itself, that combined operation, if it's Giuliani and the fake electors, Lindsey Graham and Trump, that's a slam dunk racketeering case under Georgia law. I can tell you that right now.
Greg,
So,
you've been spending a lot of time in Georgia
Yes.
doing this investigation.
Yes.
And obviously the landscape for this is the fact that there are key elections in Georgia that could change the history of this country.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk about how this plays as a backdrop to those elections? How does this sort of interweave? What impact does this DA investigation have, will it have, on those crucial elections?
Well, I think if Kemp is outed as having to try to fix the elections in Georgia, this is insulting to the people of Georgia. You have to understand that Giuliani came down to Georgia and said that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, their G-men, are a joke. Now, yes, they used to be like almost an arm of the Klan, but they've been cleaned up and they're run by real professionals. And they did an investigation of Cobb County, the absentee ballots, and whether, if you remember this whole game of mules, black people stuffing the ballot drop boxes, they went through every single ballot physically and determined that not one was fraudulent out of tens of thousands. And Giuliani said that was a joke. This is a big problem in Georgia. Georgians are very proud of Georgia. You have to understand that. And they're not too crazy about some guy with red stuff flowing down his face, this guy from New York, telling Georgians that they are a joke. Okay, so you got Rudy Giuliani telling people that they're a joke. This doesn't help Kemp, you have to understand. So he has to protect Georgia from what is seen down there by many as an attack on the integrity of Georgia. And don't forget, the Cobb County, when he said that the race in Cobb County was fixed, it was controlled by Republicans. So Kemp is trying to play both ways against the middle. He still cuddles up to Trump. He says, Trump has a problem with me. I don't have a problem with Trump. After all, Kemp is ultra right-wing. He just signed a law basically outlawing abortion in Georgia because of the new Supreme Court ruling. He's ultra right, very close with the evangelicals. So on one hand, he's trying to sell himself as Trump's buddy. On the other hand, he's trying to take some of those independents who like the fact that he appeared to be standing up to Trump. So he wants it both ways. And if the truth comes out, it's going to fall one way or the other. If he really did push back against Trump, I think he would have already just done that 20-minute, quiet appearance before the grand jury. No one would have known about it, because if he doesn't make it public, Fani Willis was not going to make it public. He could have literally come in and out. So why this crazy resistance? He's afraid of what will come out, because, it's amazing what happens, how your stories change when you're under oath as opposed to under a TV camera. You say anything on a TV camera. Under oath, it's what's called, a perjury trap. If he starts prevaricating, they'll be reading him his rights. So I think he knows that nothing he will say is going to get him any votes, and could be a real problem if any of it comes out.
Wow, this is huge. I am interested. You called it from the beginning. You've been saying that that this is the prosecution that could make all the trouble. And obviously a lot of people are frightened. And you've got a prosecutor who's not messing around, who's got a special grand jury. But other things are happening. I mean, Weisselberg
Yes.
was convicted on 15 felonies. They gave him 5 months, but he's got to say something or he'll die in Rikers Island. And believe me, I can testify, having taught there 5 years, that ain't no place to die. I can't imagine him surviving a couple of weeks anyway. So do you still think that this prosecution is going to lead?
Yes. Well,
Trump's
Georgia
problems?
Central, I keep going back to Georgia. Here I am in Los Angeles. Every year for 9 years I end up in Georgia because it's always the center of this of the schemes to bend elections. Brian Kemp is no hero. Somehow he got played as a hero just because he got in a fight with Donald Trump. We're so crazy about Trump that we make heroes of anyone who gets in a fight with him. But remember, he's fighting him from the right. So be very careful about that. In addition, if Stacey Abrams gets elected governor, this will be the first black woman in American history ever elected governor in Georgia, deep red, redneck Georgia. In addition, you have Reverend Raphael Warnock running for re-election. He was elected in the special election 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, but to finish out a short term. And and that's a very close race. I know that the liberal coastal press says, "Oh, he can't lose to Herschel Walker because all these ads that Herschel Walker put a gun to his ex-wife's head, all that type of stuff." Well, there's a lot of gun owners in Georgia who've done the same thing.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that's going to harm him. It's not harming him in the polls. I mean, the fact that he was a wife beater doesn't overcome the fact that he was a football hero, and this is Georgia. Okay, he's not a cricket star; he's a football hero. That's a very big thing. And whereas Reverend Warnock is merely a minister, a man of God, not a man of football. So it's going to be a tight race. And if Kemp is in trouble, if he gets indicted or he runs into other problems with the courts here, basically those races are up for grabs. So that they're central in terms of the races. But again, Fani Willis also has the advantage that the grand jury can she can tell a grand jury make a decision on whether Trump or any of these other characters, Giuliani, et cetera, should be indicted. And all she needs ultimately is to get a final approval from a judge. And she does not have to ask the Justice Department. There's no politicians. You just saw all the hell that broke loose because Merrick Garland personally approved the raid on Trump's Mar-a-Lago property. So in the Justice Department, you can't bring a racketeering case without the personal approval of the Attorney General, which makes it political. And they even have policy papers that no indictment should be timed to avoid any influence on an election. No such restrictions in Georgia. If Fani Willis has the evidence, she's got the indictments. And she's clearly circling in on Agent Orange.
Right, and she's not going to be distracted. You're listening to the Election Crimes Bulletin on Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. Greg Palast is our co-host for this weekly presentation. He is the fighter for your vote. He's working on a new film, Vigilante, Georgia's voter suppression hitman. Is that right?
Hitman,
Vigilante?
Yes. Yes, the Vigilante is, which refers to Brian Kemp and his new law, which allows vigilante voter challenges. Anyone can challenge anyone else. And so far, 88 Republicans have challenged over 250,000 voters. By the way, not one Democrat has challenged one voter.
Well, speaking of, let me come back to that grand jury, because the other thing about it, we were talking about the fact that the DA is an expert in dealing with in RICO statutes and stuff like that. Yes. And it does seem like she's going RICO because it requires the amount of people that she's interested in, that she's planning to subpoena. Doesn't that give us an indication that she's going big?
Oh, absolutely. I think that she's going where the evidence is. You can't be submitting fake electors and not expect the cops to show up at your door. You can't say the crime is too big to investigate. And she's doing the right thing by doing a very systematic, careful grand jury review, witness by witness, including, by the way, we haven't mentioned, a lesser-known character, but very important on the right wing, Cleta Mitchell, who is, an attorney who specializes in figuring out vote suppression schemes. And she was actually on the call with Donald Trump to the state. And I want to know if she's on the call with Brian Kemp, because Brian Kemp's vote suppression tactics look like they were written by Cleta Mitchell and her organization, the Bradley Foundation and True the Vote, these ultra-right-wing, basically anti-voter organizations.
Wow.
So I don't think we can get away from the issue of vote suppression and the attempt to overturn the election in Georgia. And I would like to see, I was hoping at some point that Fani Willis will open up the investigation even wider into the vote suppression tactics in general.
Okay. There's a lot more to come from Greg Palast. Again, the film is Vigilante. Check out Greg Palast, gregpalast.com, and you can see the work in progress. Greg, as always, we appreciate it. Before I say goodbye, I'm just going to make this point. We don't have time to talk about it.
Okay.
But this is a typical thing that the junk food corporate press does. They've been hitting this story about Donald Trump can't find a lawyer sort of thing. What a dummy. How everybody hates him. He'll never find a lawyer. Well, apparently he's looking for good lawyers because he's going to be represented by Atlanta lawyer Drew Finling, who has quite the reputation. I believe he was the head of the National Defense Lawyers Association. This dude is nobody to mess around with. But they say how many hours the corporate media spent on he can't find an attorney. You have enough money, Greg? Wouldn't you say you're going to find an attorney? Yeah.
They want the soap opera instead of the substance. I haven't heard, except for our reports. That's why we do these reports. I'm waiting for the substance in the mainstream press, and they seem to be, it's a lot easier to report on the soap opera. Does he have an attorney? Do people like him? What about Kemp and Trump? Are they still dating? That's all nonsense. This is a very serious case that has not been properly explained, and boy, is it dangerous for the entire right-wing network.
Oh, yeah. Voter suppression on out. Greg Palast, gregpalast.com. You're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio.